Okay, guys. Today and Monday, I promise, are basically the last days of review. Just been looking at a lot of grammar very quickly because it's like we're trying to review basically the last 10, especially last 5 chapters, um, before the point that we're at now in the textbook. And so yeah, it's just been a lot of grammar. Hopefully some of it is sticking. We'll keep reviewing like lightly and like going forward, but starting next week after Monday, we'll do a big verb summary, the verb version of the noun thing we made yesterday on Monday. And then we'll kind of like just live in the present moment again and start really focusing on chapter 20. So next Friday, we'll have our first translation quiz, and I'll make sure to ease you into it. You'll have seen one of the translations like always, and then I'll have you spot translate once. But tomorrow is chapter 20 vocabulary. I'll just pick 10 since y'all had to study a lot for these 3 chapters. I'm just going to pick 10 measly words from chapter 20, but that'll be tomorrow. Usually you will not have all of this quizzing and reviewing going on. So next week things will start to kind of slow down again, and we'll just kind of focus on one thing at a time. But let's do a review of chapter 19 today, which is basically going to get us up to where we are now on chapter 20. And that'll also expand on what we were looking at yesterday with passive verbs. So remember, we were looking at passive verbs. We were looking at present, imperfect, and future passive verbs. I wonder if I can click back to them. Yeah, they're just right back here. Still getting used to those. The tricky thing is that you're always having to whip out these helping verbs, right, depending on what person the verb is. So it's not just I verb, but I am a verb when we have this passive, present, first person, singular, ending, etc. So on Monday, when we make our verb summary, we'll have a big passive section, and we'll add these endings to them. So ris, tor, more, many, and for. I am verb, you are verb, it is verb, we are verb, etc. Should be something you're getting comfortable with. These endings do, I mean, it's another batch of random letter sequences to memorize, which you guys have mostly been your career in Latin, is memorizing random sequences of letter endings. But they are pretty distinct, so hopefully you can spot them pretty easily, or get used to spotting them. You've already done some spotting of them since back in like April when we first got them. But unfortunately, that was only 3 tenses with a perfect voice, and there are technically, did it freeze again? And it's doing, well, no, maybe it's not actually doing the full projector freezy thing. Yes. Okay, we might be good. Anyway, there are 3 other tenses, right? Not only do the perfect tense endings still give us trouble in like normal active verb mode, they're probably going to give us a little trouble in the perfect passive mode. So yeah, there's present, imperfect, future passive, but there's also perfect passives for all 3 of the perfect tenses. These are actually really easy to spot. I sense sometimes that you guys still get thrown off by the regular perfect tense active endings, est, it, in this, era. These at least, they should be pretty recognizable. The only trick is that you're going to have to know the 4th principal part of the verb, because that is how we form these. The 4th principal part of the verb is about to become really important in chapter 23. It's what my 9th graders are struggling through right now. But this is the first time we are using the 4th principal part, which is kind of exciting. We've always seen that 4th principal part. It took us like until chapter 12 to mess with the 3rd principal part. Now we are messing with the 4th principal part, circa chapter 19. Usually, thankfully, the 4th principal part looks pretty much like the first 2 principal parts. We can usually recognize it pretty well. We take that 4th principal part, and it automatically kind of has a second declension neater ending, and that's the ending. And we can add any kind of ending we need because these are going to agree in person, case, and gender with the noun that they are agreeing with. And then we add it to a form of sum essay. I wonder why that's so small. But we're adding it to a form of sum essay to reflect the person and number and tense of the verb that we're expressing. And so with present passive, it was I am verb, you are verb, it is verb. The helping verbs were in present tense, am, is, are. Now the helping verb will be perfect tense helping verb. So I was verbed or have been verbed. What should we stick with? Y'all want to pick one and stick with it? Should we go with I was and were verbed, or I have been verbed? Because with have been, except for third person singular, at least it does stay really like consistent. Where was switches to were in the second person back to was and then were, so that's like ever so slightly less consistent. Let's go with have. I like have been verbed because we think of perfect tense as the have verb tense. So let's use that for the perfect passive. So laudato sum, say it's laudato sum here. I'm taking the fourth principal part, I'm adding a masculine ending, masculine nominative. So let's say Cicero laudato sum. What would Cicero laudato sum be? Well, for one thing, that doesn't make sense. It would need to be third person to match a subject like Cicero. So Cicero laudatus est would be Cicero has been verbed. So it's passive in the same way the passive verbs yesterday were passive. It's just that it is the helping verb is expressing a different tense, the perfect tense, right? Something that is happening in the past. So hopefully you guys know sumus est, sumus est pretty well, because that's going to be important going forward. Maybe there can be a part of a verb summary on Monday that has just all forms of sum esse. That would probably have to be a flip side of the other verb endings, because sum esse just has so much going on. But yeah, there's two parts to these verbs, and that's the trick of it. There's the participle part. That's what we call the fourth principal part of a verb, the participle. That's kind of like almost functioning like an adjective in the way it agrees in case, number, and gender with the subject. And then there's the sum esse part, and that's the more verby part of it that is agreeing with person, number, and tense with the kind of verb that you're trying to have expressed. So second, third, we're going through all the persons there. But let's look, and so that this is future perfect, right? If we use the future forms of sum esse, that is future perfect. I did one of those things where it corrected my font size in ways that I did not want it to. So that would be I will have been verbed. This is not going to show up too much, just because, I mean, future perfect active doesn't show up too much, so future perfect passive won't show up too much either. And then we have, why did we do future first? Then we have imperfect passive as well. So eram, eras, erat, those are the imperfect forms of sum esse. Yeah. So what would puella laudata est be? Puella laudata est. There you have question. You want this? Okay, cool. That's too far. And then you should have your noun chart. Oh, did you not make a noun chart yet? I still need to make a copy for you guys. Okay, I'm gonna do that today. I have a lot of stuff in advisement to do. I'm gonna make y'all copies of that. Noun chart. Okay. What would puella laudata est be? What verb is laudata from? You don't know? It's a chapter 1 verb. I think we saw it yesterday, Phoenix. Yeah, lauda, laudare, which means what, Carly? Good, yeah. And so it's laudo, laudari, laudawi, laudavi, if I pronounce the V, it's the perfect stem. And then laudatum is the fourth principal part. So they took laudatum and they made it agree with puella. So it's just laudata, right? That part's simple. And then the form of sum esse they went with needed to be third person singular. And it is. And so this is perfect passive. So how would it translate? The girl what? Yeah. Has been praised. Exactly. Whoops. The girl has been praised. We're going to go with has been verb. Yeah. Whereas the present passive would just be laudatur, right? So the thing that's kind of nice about present passive, I guess, is that it's all just one word, which is maybe that's kind of nice or something that's like it's easier to parse. That's just third person singular present passive laudatur. The girl is praised. So with perfect passive, laudata est is the girl has been praised. So it's just a difference. So it's a time difference. When she is praised, that's something that's like happening now. When she has been praised, that's something that happened in the past. Not the perfect past, but the past a little closer to the present. Good. Oh, and that's my example right down there. Why did I write that up there? The girl is praised. There you go. What would Puella Laudata Erat be? That's happening even further in the passive. That's not perfect passive. It's what passive? It's blue perfect passive. So not the girl has been praised, that she had. That's all it is. The girl had been praised. Yeah. Again, blue perfect, it's just all about using the helping verb had. Because had expresses that it's happening even further in the past. This is as far as we can go in the past in Latin or any language, actually, in English. And yeah, it's agreeing with Puella in terms of case number, gender. Hopefully, are getting kind of used to recognizing ERA. If this was by itself, that's just the imperfect form of est, like was. But in this context, it's expressing blue perfect. It's this kind of confusing thing where for perfect passive, we use the present form of sum esse, so there's kind of a relation between present and perfect. For blue perfect passive, we use the imperfect form of sum esse, so there's kind of a relationship between blue perfect and imperfect. Bear with me. And then for the future perfect passive, we're using the future form of sum esse, ero, eris, erit, and that expresses future perfect. If I lost you there, I don't blame you. I lost myself on that. But hopefully y'all kind of see that relationship happen. I'm just trying to say that erat by itself is imperfect, but in this context, it's making it blue perfect, if that makes sense. Anytime you see this like two-part verb thing happening, where you can tell it's like, oh, I think it's a part of a verb and it's a form of sum esse, you know that it's one of the perfect passives, one of these three. And the way you find out what tense it is if you have the present form of sum, it's perfect passive, etc. I don't want to repeat myself, but and then one more, literae scriptae erunt. What is scriptae going to be? That's the part of what? Parker, what is scriptae the part of? Close. Yeah, you know this verb. What is it? It's right. Yeah, so scribo, scribera, scripsi, weird third person part. Then scriptum is the fourth person part. So it's agreeing with literae, right? It's got the same ending. That'll always be really easy unless I guess it's a third declension noun or fourth declension noun for you guys, because these have first or second declension endings. But at least half the time they'll be identical endings. And then erunt is agreeing in person and number. It's third person plural to agree with the plural literature or letters. So what would this be? Oh, yeah, I'm making it got like a little too cold left. I'm sticking my guns. Ain't cold of you. You said have or had? Yeah, exactly. The letters more like, or the literature has been written. Wait. Will have. That's not future perfect. There's no way. Oh, it is. It is. Sorry. So have been written would be sunt. That would be, yeah, because you thought it was just like perfect passive. I did too, actually. Erunt, if we think about it, that is the third person plural future form of sum esse. So it by itself it means they will. Yikes. So it's the letters will have been written. Don't worry though, future perfect passive is not really a thing. It barely comes up ever. There's like always a moment like that in class where like the PowerPoint disagrees with me. Okay. Some participles to look out for. I try to pick the ones that are maybe you would not recognize. So some of these actually do look pretty different from the first two principal parts. We assume, like I have been seen, that looks pretty different than Wadeo Waderi, but it's, I mean, the first syllable is kind of similar. You, well, we never see this verb anyway, means to help. You assume I have been helped. That looks pretty different. Sum esse has a weird one. That one's not going to come up. Don't worry about it. Aldeo Aderi has no perfect stem, but it does have a fourth principal part. So also assume would be I have been dared. Wouldn't come up too much. Some of these, if you try to translate them, you see why like they're actually not going to come up too much. Ago Agara Octasum, I have been done, maybe. But that one actually does look like it. It's just weird to translate. And then so on and so forth. Tractus, that's fine. We get the word tractor from it. I have been carried or dragged. Vivo, that one won't come up. We ran into that one the other day because it's actually identical to the one for Winkle Weekera. Miso Sum, didn't we see that Hercules? I have been sent. Yeah, we did see that. This one's a little different. This is where we get the word status, like the standing of something, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and then the other thing in this chapter is they give us the additional use of qui, qui, quod. We reviewed qui, qui, quod yesterday for relative pronouns, but we can also use them to ask questions. It's all the same form, so quis is unique to the interrogative pronoun. It doesn't show up with qui, qui, quod relative pronouns. And yeah, we've seen this a lot in the Hercules story. They were asking questions. They were asking an open-ended question that's an interrogative pronoun, like who is going to teach today, versus an interrogative adjective would be like which teacher is going to teach today, where it's agreeing with the word teacher and asking about a noun in the sentence. So interrogative adjectives ask for more specific identification of a person or thing, and both precedes and agrees in gender, number, and case with the noun it is asking about. So quim librum legis would be, hopefully we can kind of tell, oh, maybe it's agreeing in case, number, and gender with librum, so they go together. It's which book are you reading? We got some examples here. What would quis librum tibi dedit be? Different than that example, quim librum legis. Not which book, but, well, actually, let's see. It's going to be who gave you the book, because it's not agreeing with librum. That would be like quid librum, because librum is accusative here, so it would have to be quim accusative. Good. This next one, that's just an example of a relative clause, just to remind you that these are also used in relative clauses. And then last we have a relative or interrogative adjective. Again, which book did he verb? Okay, good. This is the vocabulary from this chapter, which y'all just got quizzed on, so y'all probably know it really well by now. All right. And then chapter, I think this is 21, so y'all don't need this. Oh yeah, that's for the next page. Ignore it. All right, let's do a little bit of practice. We might finish early, or we might talk a little history, mythology, so we can ask some of those questions in Jeopardy tomorrow. But I already have this color coded for us, so, oh wait, no, we did this one. How about let's do Themistocles here. What's our verb, Keaton? You tell I'm losing y'all with the review. I don't blame you. Been a lot of review. Seratute is the verb? We do have the verb sero servare. Hello? Uh-oh. Keaton can't recognize his verb. Uh-oh. Addie? Say it again. Gricium? Not Gricium. We do have verbs that end in am. It's not that. That just means Greek something. Luke? Liberawit. Yeah. So, you know, Latin verbs 90% of the time are the last word in the sentence. There are certain structures that do not have the verb at the end, but usually it's at the end. Keaton, I wonder why you couldn't recognize this as the ending, or why this is a verb ending. What tense is it? Well, we don't have the verb summary yet, so unless you have a sheet that you made yourself. But we'll make the verb summary on Monday, I promise, and then that would be the sheet you'd get out. Just give me a first and a number, and I'll leave you alone. What, first, second, or third? Yeah, and it's singular, right? What tense is it, Bailey? Not future. That would be libera bit, B-I-T. Carly? Imperfect? That would be bot, B-A-T. So y'all are proving a point that I'm okay with y'all proving, because I know this to be true. We still really struggle with this tense. And I get why, Luke. It's weird y'all haven't said. That would just be liberat. This is from Libo, liberare. Let's write it out, because we need to. That's fine. Libero, liberare. Liberawi. Bailey? That would be liberawerat with an E-R-A-T at the end. Remember, we'd use the imperfect form of sum esse to make it pluperfect. It's just perfect. Somehow Caden, I don't know, that's weird. I don't know how you know that. But yeah, this is just perfect. So I wonder why we said basically everything other than perfect. So You might want to look at this guy again. We talked about, yeah, y'all just really struggle with the perfect. Again, this is the most common tense we're going to see going forward. And these end in IT in the third person singular. That doesn't help you so much as hopefully starting to get the hang of what third principal parts of verbs look like. They end in letters like V, X, or U a lot of the time. So maybe that's part of it because I try to do this the weird W sounding V. So maybe I shouldn't say libera, liberare, liberawi. I should just pronounce the V, liberavi. Okay, that V, once we see that V, we know we're in the perfect system. I'm not saying erat, it's not pluperfect. I'm not saying erit, it's not future perfect. It's just perfect. So err towards thinking that verbs are perfect. That should be the thing that you think of like off the bat. And then like rule out other things. But so what did Themistocles do? It's free. He did what? Free. Yeah, he freed something. Who did he free? He's got to free a direct object. Free what? So you think Greek goes with servant? I don't know if Greek goes with servant. They have different looking endings, not even just superficially, but like I don't think they could be the same case. Maybe he just serves the Greek. What do you think? The Persian? Persico, I don't think that could be a direct object. That might be the thing he's freeing the direct object from. Libero's weird. It's one of our like 3 verbs we have that takes an ablative of separation. So we're going to free a direct object from an ablative. Let's see. Anybody else want to take a crack at it? Lynn? Yeah, we're going to look at the direct object and then, yeah, so he frees the Greek. The Greek from what? So that's a kind of new concept, ablative separation. Probably servitude. And then what do we do with bello persico? What case is that? This is kind of tricky, actually, Parker. Ablative. It's ablative. So what kind of ablative do you think it could be? I first thought means Themistocles like with the Persian War. Well, we already had the separation with servitude. That's the thing that makes the most sense. That he freed the Greek direct object from servitude. So it can't be a second ablative separation. It's obviously a different kind of ablative than servitude. Maybe not obviously, but like the fact that it's like not next to servitude. I think it might be an ablative of time when, like in the Persian War, Themistocles liberated Greece from servitude. The only reason I know that is just context. I thought ablative means at first too, but like with the Persian War, it just sounds kind of strange. Like, what would that mean? That he's like using the Persian War to free Greeks? The Persians were trying to like take over the Greeks. So that's kind of a context thing. So usually ablative of time when it'll like be a word that's really expressing a period of time, like age or time, like tempor or aura. But sometimes it's something like that where you almost need context to think of like, okay, the Persian War was like a time, it was a period of time. Let's do one more and then we'll basically be done for the day. I might just kind of like give y'all a summarized version of the historical summary that I'm giving to my Latin 1.5 classes today, so that I can quiz y'all on some of that in Jeopardy tomorrow. What's our subject here? Out loud, anyone? This is a small enough class where y'all can straight up talk out loud. I know y'all have masks on. Huh? Yeah, Demosthenes. Do you remember what Demosthenes is? Probably not. He's this Greek orator who stood up to the Macedonians, to Alexander the Great's dad. And Cicero looked up to him. He used to put a bunch of rocks in his mouth to get over the speech impediment he had so he could learn to be a very good public speaker. What is our verb, Keaton? No, just kidding. How about Cora? What's our verb? Maybe Keaton too. Maybe everyone.
Either. I don't know.
Aiden? Good guess. Person who has had almost no Latin at all. You're close, kind of. Carly? Good. What tense is pronunciado, Carly? Can you tell? No. That's Elena? Imperfect. Did you know that, Keaton? It was imperfect? Okay, yeah, y'all know you're imperfect.
Yeah.
So the verb review day on Monday is gonna I can tell it's so needed. That's fine. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, bomb, boss, bot, bomb is bots is bot. Those are like the best verb endings we have because they apply to all 4 conjugations. They're very distinct. They all have BA in them. There's no exception to that. I guess the only one that's a little weird is first person singular. I was verbing since it's in. But yeah, I love those guys. They're the best, man. They're great. Future gets weird and complicated, and obviously perfect is kind of like a hot mess for all of us still at this point. But so how would we translate that? Pronunciation, it doesn't quite need pronouncing. We get that word from it, but it's more like what? What did I say Demosthenes was good at? He was good at like speaking. Kind of speaking is like a little more like maybe like reciting. So Demosthenes what? How do we translate the imperfect Chloe? Demosthenes. Do we just say Demosthenes recites? If it's imperfect, how do we make it imperfect? There's a helping verb that means W. That would be good. Parker?
Was reciting?
Was reciting. Or I guess, again, we could just say recited. I'm trying to push this year that we translate both the imperfect and perfect as just verb. And forget about was and have or has and just use verb. So we could just say Demosthenes recited or was reciting. We'll clear that up on Monday, I promise. Was reciting, what direct objects was he reciting? Addie, what do you think he was reciting? Yeah, many verses. And it looks like I left a macron off of this U, but what declension is Wersus from? Wersus. Did you fangle declension? Fairly, Elena? Because Moltos is going like Wersus, but you might not tell if you're not using this declension line. It is. Luke, we're going to say fourth? Yeah, so it's this guy right here. And he is the nastiest part of the fourth declension because he shows up accusative plural, genitive singular, and nominative plural. So that's why I need to not forget that macron, because without the macron, that's actually just like nominative singular. So yeah, he was reciting, or I'm sorry, he recited or has recited many verses, uno spiritu. Spiritus, it makes me think of animus. Animus can mean spirit, life, but also it's related to breath. Because they thought your breath was like your spirit, basically, like when you're breathing. I mean, it makes sense, right? When you're breathing, that's when you're alive. You stop breathing, you're alive. Kind of makes sense. Well, here, so spiritu is just breath. So don't. I'm sorry if you got confused about the monomus thing, but here it's just breath. So uno spiritu. What could that be there? What case are they? What could they mean? Parker, then Dr. Phoenix.
The ablative.
Yeah, they're ablative. What do you think? What kind of ablative or how would we translate? Yeah, with one breath. So this is an ablative of what? Well, there's fourth declension, sort of, by the way. I would say means. Accompaniment has to be a person. It is means because we don't have a preposition, and yet I still might translate this as in a single breath. With is the way we're supposed to do ablative of means. In English, when you do something in a single breath, you might use the preposition in. Anyway, I just want you to know that we can be a little flexible with the ablative means if we need to make it sound like more natural English. But okay, yeah, good. All right, that's all for that. Y'all should just look. Y'all can critique the graphic design that I'm whipping out in my my crash course summary of Greco-Roman mythology. It's all mostly stuff y'all have heard, but we're a little short now in terms of content for this class, but that's fine. We only got 10 minutes. But yeah, so I'm talking to kids, some of them for the second time, about, I'm like going all the way from the Bronze Age, around here, up to, I'm trying to like get to the Roman Empire basically. But just real quick, I want to make sure people have like a good conception of like time. How many years ago was the year 1200 BCE?
A long time ago.
It was like 3,220 years ago, right? And that's the end of this Bronze Age. The Bronze Age lasted from roughly 3000 BCE, so like way past that point that I don't have up there, to around 800-ish. It ends at different times depending on what part of the world you're talking about. Before it was the what age anyone? Yeah, so what's after it, Luke? What metal?
Oh, wait.
Metal? Yeah.
Is it iron?
It is iron. Yeah. And what is that referring to when we call something the Stone Age or the Bronze Age and the Iron Age? These are prehistoric eras. We don't. Someone asked me the other class what age we're now, and I was like, I don't really know. I don't think we have designation anymore. Maybe the Silicon Age. I'm not sure. Do you have a question, Andrew? Oh, I thought yeah. Yeah. What are those? What are they? Why are they labeled that way? Yeah, it's literally the technology they're using. Back in the Stone Age, they were rudimentary enough to just be using carved out pieces of rock and stone for the caves that they dwelled in. And then in the Bronze Age, they start to get used to mining for things like copper and tin, and they have the basic enough smelting technology to smelt them into copper. Now, people had iron going all the way back to when pyramids of Giza were being built during the Bronze Age. Like, they had iron. It's just that it wasn't popular yet because it was kind of hard to get. It starts to get more popular at the beginning of the Iron Age here in the Green period because they're kind of running out of bronze. And so they started needing iron, and they get more technologically advanced enough to smelt iron and steel for their weapons, their tools, etc. And so before 1200, we had the Mesopotamians near the Indus River Valley the Indus River Valley civilization, which is like actually near Troy, and the Mesopotamians near the Tigris and the Euphrates to modern day Iraq, getting really advanced. Egypt was too. Egypt had already built their pyramids, and civilizations were starting to get kind of quote unquote modernized because they had earliest examples of like alphabets. The Phoenicians had alphabets or a alphabet. The Egyptians had hieroglyphs, and civilizations were starting to use currency. It was like currency was in its infancy. And then we had Greek civilizations like the Mycenaeans, the Trojans, and the Cretans, where the Minotaur's labyrinth was supposed to be, also doing pretty well. And then what happens around 1200? Do you remember? What happens? Civilizations are going up and up. They're able to trade with one another, so they're able to share technology and art and stuff. Yeah, maybe the Trojan War would have happened, and that is a part of a bigger collapse that happened all over the Aegean Sea, this eastern part of the Mediterranean. So the Egyptians are able to fend off some invaders, but everywhere you see a fireball, that is where a civilization was sacked. Maybe it was just briefly invaded and sacked, and they came back within a few hundred years. But it happens all up and down the Aegean in Greece and modern-day Turkey and modern-day Lebanon. And we still don't know exactly why. The historical record is so fuzzy around that time that we just have to use archaeological evidence. And archaeologists still talk about these sea people, these people that the Egyptians might have described loosely. There's this mural near the tomb of Ramses III, apparently, that depicts this battle they had around 1200, around the same time as the Trojan War, where they're fending off these people who might have been described as being from the north. But that's all we know about them. And we don't know even if it was one group of people who were going up and down sacking all of these civilizations, but it might have been. They might have been connected. They might have not been connected. There might have been famine happening in one part of the Mediterranean, so it affected the whole dang network. And at the same time, we got the Trojan War going on, which is mostly mythological, but there is archaeological evidence to suggest that there was a war around 1200 in what was called Troa, or Ilium. And so, yeah, things just kind of black out for a few hundred years. We have a Greek Dark Age at the end of the Bronze Age, and they won't emerge until the beginning of the Iron Age. But the Trojan War is this one of their favorite stories, and it's being told specifically by this guy, Homer. He tells the best version of it. You guys know Homer. Wait, y'all are 8th grade? Yeah. Okay, so next year, y'all, in your literature class, you're gonna read Odyssey over the summer and Iliad at the beginning of the year. Well, y'all read children's Homer, right? That's a very heavily adapted version of Odyssey. You're going to read the actual Odyssey over this coming summer, and then Iliad, which is even better, in my opinion, once the school year starts. Cora?
I know Homer Simpson.
Yeah. I don't know if he was, like, named after the Homer or what, but I guess that's, like, I mean, yeah, that's the only guy who's ever been named Homer was this guy until Homer Simpson. So, good for Homer Simpson, I guess. The important thing that hopefully Miss Jambor or McCullis or maybe me, it could be me next year, probably not, will teach you is that this guy might not have been real. We know almost nothing about him, especially about 100 or 200 years ago. People started to realize that, like, we know nothing about this guy. He's supposed to be a blind poet. We used to think he was literate, and he was the one who actually wrote down the epics, like the transcripts that we have. But that might not be true. If there was a Homer, he might not have been literate. He would have been one of these bards telling a banquet hall full of people these stories off the top of his head. Because if you weren't literate, if you didn't have writing in your brain, you had more room with which to memorize huge amounts of stories. And maybe it was somebody else who wrote down his versions of the stories a little bit after he was living, or maybe like it was just a separate entity. Maybe Homer was an editor who was going around collecting the best versions of the Trojan War cycle, the poetry that was involved with it. We don't really know. There's a lot of theories, but all we know is that we don't know too much. And then I'm telling kids about the Greek creation myth, which is just like when you have these primordial gods like Gaia and Uranus flipping into existence out of nothingness. And then we have other primordial gods like Eros and Nyx and Morpheus and Hemera, the god of love, night, sleep. These really big gods that aren't even, I don't think they ever are supposed to have human forms like the Olympians sometimes do. Like Gaia, I think, is literally just the planet Earth. Like that's how the Greeks thought of Gaia. Like that, this is one of the gods. It's just one planet. And then Uranus, her husband, was the sky. He's actually the heavens and like space beyond that. And then the second generation, we got the Titans, okay? Uranus and Gaia. I'm telling kids about how this dude used to eat his kids. And then that Zeus was hidden in a cave so that he could free his siblings from his dad's son. And those are the 6 Olympians that emerge after this encounter. And then we got a younger generation of Olympians after them. These guys all kind of perpetually seem like teenagers or young adults. I left out Mars and Ares, Mars/Ares. I feel bad for him. But yeah, they're the younger kids on the scene. And then after them, we got a bunch of heroes like Hercules, Perseus, Jason, Bellerophon, Atalanta, etc. And people just like tell stories about these guys in the Trojan War all day long because they don't got Netflix or YouTube or movie theaters. And these are like the main big heavy-hitting heroes. All the heroes in the Trojan War, like Odysseus and Achilles, they're actually younger than any of them. Hercules is like done doing all of his stuff almost a century before the Trojan War happens, roughly. So there is kind of a timeline to all of this. Y'all have seen this before. We know that the solar system is filled with Roman gods. It's pretty cool. I think it's really cool. Days of the month. Some of them have to do with gods. And, you know, Julius Caesar and Augustus were considered gods after they died, so those are god months. Days of the weaker gods. Today's Thor's day. Thor. Kind of cool. Tomorrow's Freya day. Freya. Anybody know anything about Freya? I should know more about the Norse gods than I do. I always forget if, like, is she maybe the wife of Odin? I should really know that. I really know that. And then we talk about how Greece has its moments, its day in the sun. It has like 1 or 2 really good centuries. They fight off the Persians. They have a little civil war that I might be talking about with Brubeck. Yeah, Brubeck or Emmons? What, like, where are y'all in history right now? Historically. American? Oh.
Yeah, boring.
Okay, so next year y'all are gonna get ancient history, I think. And then you get like, I forget what it is in high school. So what kind of history? Right, yeah, and I forget what it. I think in 9th grade it's like ancient history. Like I'll do ancient history maybe again, and then it might be British history, then American history again, for like a second time.
So
It's not British history, but like European.
is 9th grade where you get to choose like your activities, like if you want to do art or music and stuff?
There's definitely one choice in 9th grade. Yeah, you don't have to take PE anymore. You can take music instead, because music is no longer like required. Is music required for y'all?
No.
No, it's
PE
not.
is.
PE is. So PE will no longer be required. 10th grade is when things really open up, and that's when you can take Spanish, or currently it's like architecture, or there's another. I don't even know all the electives right now. But we're going to keep adding them every year. 10th grade is when it really opens up, but you do have at least one major choice in 9th grade. All right, guys, Jeopardy tomorrow. Study chapter 20. Chapter 20, vocab. Just the vocab. Y'all got that. You're going to be fine.
Music theory?
Yeah.
I mean, like, the new music teacher who also involves